Hello and welcome to Valley Girls, the bi-weekly podcast exploring everything there is to see, do, try, eat, and experience in New York's Hudson Valley by talking to the makers, the doers, the growers, the creators, and all the unique voices of the Hudson Valley. I'm Jenny Leifer.
And I'm Jennifer Santiago, and together as the Valley Girls, we're telling the Hudson Valley story one episode at a time. We're so happy you're here. Hello, and welcome to the very first February episode of Valley Girls. I am so excited to be talking about one of my favorite subjects. I know I say that all the time whenever we talk about books or pizza, but I love jazz. We haven't talked a lot about jazz on the show. I'm a big jazz lover, and I don't know if you know, but we have an absolute gem of a local radio show on Radio Kingston. It is called TransArt Presents Jazz in the Valley. It's on Radio Kingston. You can listen live Wednesdays at 7 p.m.
That's
You can
correct.
also listen online on the archive. And I am talking to the host who is here with us to tell us all about the Hudson Valley jazz scene, such as it is. Welcome, Sharif Abdus-Salaam.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here with you. This is exciting. I'm excited. Let's talk.
You definitely sound like a performer and a presenter. You have such a perfect voice for broadcasting jazz, especially when I listen to your show. It's so relaxing. I can tell that you're just in the studio enjoying every second of what you're playing, and it really comes through in the show. I love that.
Well, it's really the music that makes that happen.
Yep.
Subliminally for some, for others, they really just get it. That's why I opened the show with my in theme is a track by Duke Ellington called "The Feeling of Jazz."
Yes.
And it's my belief that in order to kind of get a little close to the music, you have to get that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a academic or mental situation.
Yes.
You got to feel the music. And once you feel the music, everything else about this music becomes fairly easily. So that's what I'm presenting and sharing with the audience every Wednesday from 7 to 9.
Yeah.
Because once you get the feeling, you'll want more. And you can get as much of this as you want because it's good for you.
Yes, I actually wrote that down. That was going to be my first question to you,
Was
or
it really?
my first comment, because the show is it's a vibe from the very first second that it comes on. It starts with a really long musical interlude before you even say anything. And of course, it's the great Sir Duke, Feeling of Jazz, which is great. And it's so accessible. So you say it's not an intellectual process. Like
Right.
you get the feeling of the jazz. And so it makes it feel like okay, I think you have probably experienced this lots in your career. There are some jazz snobs.
Yes.
And so if you say, "Oh, I love jazz," they're like, "Name every song. What do you have on vinyl?" So there's some snobbiness.
Well, if they gave me some time, I could handle that too. But nonetheless, no, you're right.
Yes, but for people who are like, I don't know, I just like it. I just like the way it feels. I like the way it makes me feel. So I love that you're positioning that show as really accessible. You don't need to know anything to enjoy it. You just gotta feel that music.
Exactly. That's the whole purpose.
Yeah.
Because I know some of those quote unquote jazz snobs or those so-called jazz aficionados.
Yeah.
They say, "Why don't you play this? Why don't you play that? Why don't you?" I said, "Well, maybe down the road, but right now we're going to have it open for whoever's there, whoever's listening, to spend maybe 15 to 20 minutes playing something by Cecil Taylor."
Mm-hmm.
Many people will say, "Well, what is?" And that's why I don't listen to this stuff.
Yeah.
You guys must be crazy. So accessible is the word.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to also do some historic stuff, and that jazz didn't just happen yesterday or even 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Sometimes you got to go all the way back. Go back to Louis Armstrong. I mean, people don't know how important really Louis Armstrong is, in that he's not just Hello Dolly. That's a small part of Louis Armstrong's contribution to this music.
Mm-hmm.
I could do a whole show on that too, but that's a whole other story. But
well, hopefully you will do a whole show on that, because I do love him. And actually, as this episode is airing, it's going to be Black History Month, and the history of jazz is obviously really shaped by Black performers and musicians, and the venues that made jazz available to the masses largely came from Black business owners early on, especially.
Oh, that's very, very true. Very, very true. And each city Of course, people know about Harlem, but there were great jazz scenes in Detroit, in Pittsburgh, even in Boston, Washington, D.C., St. Louis, I mean, wherever. Black people were, the music was there also. And the music was so very important to the community and the development of the community. I mean, it had its ills and demons and all of that, but what doesn't? But the music was strong enough to survive and has survived until today, which I think is fantastic.
Yes, I am very grateful for that. So one little note for anybody listening, I somewhat flaked on this interview, and Sharif called me and said, "Hey, are we still on?" And I said, "Sure." So because of my oversight, my co-host, Jenny, is not here today. And so we are actually just improvising a little bit with this interview, which is entirely appropriate for talking about jazz.
There you go.
Right?
There you go. Exactly.
Speaking of just the feeling of jazz, we're just getting the feeling of the interview as we go. I have more thoughts about the show.
Okay,
but
please.
First I want to know about you. What's your story? How'd you get into doing this?
I started out as a child. Now let me stop. I got involved in jazz in college, actually. Mm-hmm. I went to Columbia University in the city, New York City, and played football there, and couldn't just say, okay, the season's over, let me go study. I said, let me find what else is going on this campus. So I said, oh, they got a radio station. I said, oh, I listen to radio all the time. Let me go by there. And I actually went to, it's WKCR is the station. I actually went to Columbia's radio station to do R&B, because I'm a big R&B guy. And I was going to be the best R&B guy that ever happened in the whole world. There for a little while, half a semester or so, and I'm learning and listening and doing things. And a gentleman said, hey, man, you ever thought about doing a jazz show? I said, no. He said, well, look, I'm graduating in a couple of weeks. There's going to be one that's open. Think about it. As they say, the rest is history.
Nice.
Now, I'll tell you the year that was. Now, don't get shocked. That was 1971.
Wow. So you've been at the jazz radio show game for a while now.
Yeah, over 50-something years.
Okay. Wow.
Okay.
That's awesome.
And that has given me the opportunity to not only to listen to a lot of things, but also to meet some of the greatest musicians that have walked the earth.
Wow.
I mean, I've had the opportunity to sit down with Max Roach, Charles Mingus,
wow,
Art Blakey,
nice,
Horace Silver, Herbie Hancock. The list goes on and on and on. And that has truly changed my life, and I'm blessed because of that. But the more I sat and talked with these individuals, the more I learned not only about jazz, of course, but about life and other things. And it's been a growth process ever since, and still is. About a few years ago, I guess we're up to about 5 years, Greer Smith, who's the executive director of Trans Art and Cultural Services in the Hudson Valley, she said, Sharif, there's a radio station and they're trying to pull things together, community radio. They'd like to do some jazz. I said, would they now? So she suggested, she said, okay, I think you'd be perfect. I said, we worked out the logistics, and because I don't live in the Hudson Valley. I don't live in Kingston.
Okay.
So I would drive up every Wednesday. I'd be an hour up and an hour down and 2 hours on the air, and I'd be very tired on Thursdays. But I understood the need to bring jazz to the Hudson Valley. Because she was telling me it's a wasteland. And I'm like, I can understand. A lot of places are wastelands, Greer.
Yeah.
And so she said, okay, let me hook you up with the folks at Radio Kingston. And they heard what I could do. And they're like, okay, great. Come on, let's do this. And been doing, I guess it's about 5 years now. I can't believe it's been a full 5 years, but that's how I began on Radio Kingston. 2-hour program every Wednesday from 7 to 9. And hopefully it'll stay that way into the near future, into the far future, actually.
Yeah. All right. So before we go any further, your show is called Trans Art Presents Jazz in the Valley.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about Trans Art as an organization and the mission?
Sure. Trans Art is a cultural institution. And as I say each week, so folks kind of get an idea, Trans Art and Cultural Services uses the transformative power of art to advance and preserve the history, popular culture, and art of peoples of African descent, cultivating communities where all voices are heard, understood, and valued. And what's going to be happening as we go into 2025, Greer Smith, who's the executive director, we've been talking, and we might start pairing up on the program. So she could bring in a lot of the other things that Trans Art and Cultural Services does. There's an art gallery at the headquarters. They present music from time to time. So we'll be giving you a lot more than we've given you in the past. In addition to some great music, you'll hear a lot about what's happening actually in and around Kingston culturally. So I'm looking forward to that also.
All right. But what I'm hearing is that we need Greer to come on the show
definitely.
and talk
no
to
doubt
us
about
too.
It.
Okay.
No doubt about that.
Nice.
Because this whole thing it's her idea, you know. And I had known Greer, the fact that every year there's an annual Jazz in the Valley concert, third Sunday in August, and I've been emceeing that concert for the last 20-something years. In fact, this year is the 25th anniversary.
Yay!
It's held in Poughkeepsie at it's an outdoor venue. Warriors Park, right down on the Hudson.
I grew up a few minutes from there.
Did you really?
Yep.
They put up a big tent, but if you don't want to sit under the tent, you just bring your blanket or your chair.
Nice.
And it's a full afternoon from noon till about 6, and we have an absolute ball. We have an absolute great time every August, and we've had on our stage just about most people that you can think of. Sometimes we get them early. Say Samara Joy. You familiar with Samara Joy?
Yeah.
We got Samara Joy when nobody knew who Samara Joy was.
Nice.
And then we got veterans like Ron Carter and Gary Bartz and Jimmy Cobb. I mean, a lot of them have passed. Randy Weston, Roy. I mean, the list goes on and on. And once again, if you go to the Trans Art website, which is Transart Inc., TRANSARTINC.org, you can look under Jazz in the Valley and you can see some of the great artists that we've shared with the world over the past 24 years. And I think this year is going to be really something special since it's our 25th. We might even do 2 days. But
nice.
You didn't hear from me, okay?
Nice. All right. Well, we need to be there because also if it's in August, that's right around my birthday. So it sounds like a good birthday present for me.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. That'd be
very
great.
Nice. Oh, that's exciting. Okay. And the link that you gave, we'll put all the links in our show notes and on the episode page on our website. So it'll be easy for everybody to find. Going back to the show. So you're saying a lot of names that you're talking about. I would have loved to see Ron Carter. That you've had some really great performers that you've brought into the event.
Every year, no doubt.
So talking about, whether you know jazz or you don't know jazz, there's going to be some people that everybody has heard of, right? Everybody's heard of Coltrane and Miles Davis and obviously Duke Ellington.
I would hope so. That's the whole problem. It's not as prevalent as you might think. I've had conversations just with people and they don't know who Duke Ellington was.
That
important.
Makes me really sad.
It is sad. And it's amazing. And I'm not talking about kids.
Yeah.
I'm talking about people 30 years old, 40 years old. And you're like, you don't know. Have you heard? Oh, I've heard the name, but I don't know. Okay. But so there's a lot of work that still needs to be done.
Yeah. But for those of us who know very well who Duke Ellington is and Monk, and I also love a lot of the more contemporary artists. So I listen to jazz shows, I listen to jazz stations. I love to hear new music that's coming out. I love to find emerging artists. But also one thing that I love about your show is that I have found out about historical figures who had a huge impact on the world of jazz that I didn't know anything about. So
I'm glad to hear that.
So the episode that you had about Hampton Hawes, he's a fascinating guy. I had never heard of him. I mean, maybe you want to just tell really a high-level version of his story. I think that episode was back from September 2024, if somebody wants to go and find it.
Hampton Hawes, Los Angeles-based musician. I guess you have West Coast, East Coast kind of stuff. So a lot of people here in New York and on the East Coast really didn't hear much from Hampton Hawes. Excellent, excellent pianist. And he needs to be heard. The thing about Hampton Hawes, which is really amazing, he played with all the major guys who were around, those in Los Angeles, as well as a lot of cats who came from New York. Hampton Hawes got himself in trouble, as many musicians did. Drugs are a reality, or were a reality, are a reality, more so back then than actually now, which is great. But he got in trouble, and they set him up, the feds did. So they prosecuted him and sent him to jail. While in jail, He's watching TV one day, and I think it was President Kennedy who was on TV. He said, man, I'm going to write to the president. And he wrote to the president and got his sentence commuted. And he was let out of prison. But Hampton Hawes, you got to read his autobiography. It's called Raise Up Off Me. That should tell you who Hampton was.
Yeah.
It's like Raise Up Off Me. But his music is excellent. And that would be someone that you could really get into. And during the show, each week, we have a featured artist. And usually the second hour of our program, we just take that hour and try and give you a slight hint or a glimpse into who this particular artist might be. And I'm glad that you picked up on somebody like Hampton Hawes, who you are unfamiliar with, and hopefully went on and do some additional listening and really see, wow, this guy is good, you know, and then learn more about him. I think that's what it's all about. That's really the purpose of the program is you first, you got to hear it. And if you hear it, you like it. And I would hope you would then pursue more of it. Oh, I need to listen to, you know, because in an hour, I can only give you but so much. Always run out of time. As I say, too much music, too little time. That's my theme at the end of the program. Because there's so much going on with this music and the musicians that created it. So Hampton Hawes.
You are an excellent storyteller too. Is that just who you are, or did you have some training in this?
No, I had a colleague at WKCR at Columbia. His name, Phil Schaap. We were lifelong friends. Phil passed away. I can't believe it's been 4 years or 5 years now. Phil Schaap. I don't know if that name rings a bell. He won 8 Grammys for reproductions and putting histories together. He was the curator at Jazz and Lincoln Center. Wynton Marsalis hired him because Wynton wanted somebody who can handle the job. But Phil Schaap, great historian, taught me a lot about the music, and I learned a lot from him. And he's always like, okay, Sharif, you know, you got to go back. It didn't just start here. You know, people say, oh, Sharif, you're a great lover of John Coltrane. And I'm like, yes, of course I love John Coltrane. I said, well, who did John Coltrane listen to? Who influenced John? I mean, he didn't come out the clear blue playing like he did. The fact that he played alto before he played tenor, and who were some of his influences, who were his young colleagues. I mean, people like Jimmy Heath in Philadelphia, where he grew up. He actually born in North Carolina, but grew up in Philadelphia. Benny Golson, the great Benny Golson, was another colleague of John Coltrane when they were teenagers. All of these things have influences. And they all love Charlie Parker, of course. But then who loved Lester Young more than Charlie Parker? There's a whole lot to it. There really is. And I think that's what's so exciting.
That is such an interesting kind of serendipity that you're talking about this, because I just a couple days ago finished reading the little book called Steal Like an Artist. It's by an artist, writer. His name is Austin Kleon. And he talks about how there's nothing new under the sun. The concept that there's nothing new under the sun is from the book of Ecclesiastes, just to say how long we have known that there's no such thing as an original idea. But there are ways that you can make the expression new. And that happens a lot in jazz, especially. I mean, everybody's always doing a new version, a new rendition, a new combination. And I love that. But one of the things that he talks about was that instead of saying that you were influenced by someone, you say you took influence from them. And he talks about taking it back, just like you just said. If you say, okay, well, I was heavily influenced as a writer by Stephen King. Okay, who did Stephen King read? Okay, Stephen King says one of his biggest inspirations is Shirley Jackson. Okay, who did Shirley Jackson read? Yeah. You know, so going back,
that's so
the
important.
Artists you love, who did they love? Because none of us is making this stuff up from scratch. As much as we might want to think we are, no matter what kind of art we're making, somebody has done it before.
Yes. There's no doubt. And you can pick up whatever instrument, and you can take that instrument back through individuals. Say the trumpet, for instance. Everybody talk about Miles, and you could talk about Miles forever, but everybody talks about Miles. But who did Miles listen to? I mean, even Louis Armstrong played trumpet, but he also listened to the cats in New Orleans. He just developed what he did. And after Miles came Roy Eldridge. They, who? Roy Eldridge? Never heard of Roy Eldridge. You need to find out who Roy Eldridge was. And after Roy Eldridge was Dizzy Gillespie. Now, Miles came out of Roy Eldridge and came out of Dizzy, but there were other jazz musicians around at the same time that they influenced each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the social environment also that created the sounds. And that's how people follow music from Dixieland to swing, to bebop, to hard bop. I mean, there's a whole history there.
Mm-hmm.
And what's great about the history is that you can relay, you can look at the history of the music when it started to develop, and look at the history of the society.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the history of the local community, because it's one and the same. There's one and the same. I mean, people talk about Charlie Parker, and you better talk about Charlie Parker, but he came out of the big band era in Kansas City, but there was something that he heard that other people weren't hearing. And he got together with Dizzy Gillespie and said, yeah, I kind of hear it the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And things just began to blossom from there. There's just so much. There's so much great stuff. You look at a guy like Jackie McLean, for instance, and how he grew up in Harlem, and his good friends were Sonny Rollins, the drummer Art Taylor. And there was a whole scene in Harlem at the time that just began to develop and, did so many great things with this music. Oh, we could talk for days and days and days, but getting to understand the history and know that these things are related,
Mm-hmm.
and that anybody who's quote unquote new on the scene had to come from somewhere.
Yep.
You can't wake up one morning, somebody give you a saxophone or bass or drums, and all of a sudden you think, you're the best thing since sliced bread. It just can't happen. It just can't happen.
What's also exciting is the way that jazz is it's ever evolving. It's really inclusive. And even though there is nothing new under the sun, there's always something new. So one of the contemporary musicians that I really like is Monty Alexander. He's a Jamaican performer.
Oh, sure.
And
sure.
so I fell absolutely in love with his album that was called Warika Hill Rasta Monk. And so he redoes all the Thelonious Monk songs that we all know and love, or that I really know and love. But then he puts his own kind of Rasta spin on them. Warika Hill is the area of Jamaica where he came from. And it's familiar, but it's also totally fresh. And I love how there's always, you might think like, okay, well, Thelonious Monk's been dead for, I don't know, 80 years, 100 years. He's been dead for a long time. So what are we doing? What's new about Monk? Well, guess what? Monty Alexander has something for you that's totally fresh. And I just love how there's always a new way to express this feeling of jazz.
What I think is great is Monty Alexander. I would hope that people who hear and love Monty Alexander, like you do, would then go back and listen to Thelonious Monk.
Yep.
To hear what it sounded originally.
Yeah.
And that'll really blow your mind. You really get a much better connect. Oh man, I love Monty Alexander. This is great.
Yeah.
Well, let's see what Monk did with this in 1940.
Yeah.
In 1950. And now Monty's doing it now, in the 2000s. That is really what's so great about this music.
Yep.
I mean, it'll last forever, and it'll be around forever. As long as people have a brain and a heart, jazz will never die. Yeah. I mean, there was a period where people said jazz is dead and all that, but that's a whole other story too.
No. All right. So jazz is definitely not dead, but not also dead. Greer was not totally wrong when she said wasteland. So I feel like anybody who has spent any time in the Hudson Valley knows that it is a very creative collection of communities. And I know so many musicians and performers who are kind of in that more maybe singer-songwriter kind of vein. I feel like that's the vibe that you imagine for the Hudson Valley. So considering our proximity,
I think it's because it's the easiest to present.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you're a singer. Maybe you know somebody who plays a little piano, or somebody who's a guitarist, or maybe you do both. You could probably get a gig better than saying, well, I got a quintet.
Yeah.
Is the venue going to pay for a quintet? Or you're going to work for the money from the door? I mean, there's a lot of different elements involved with the presentation of this music. And whoever is presenting it, maybe they might have gotten a grant to help present the music. Because once again, knowing who people are, if somebody says, oh, I got this great jazz quintet that's coming in, you guys got to hear it. And you may say, well, who's playing? And none of the names sound familiar. Do you really go, or say, well, I don't know, I'll have to see, but if it's a big name, quote unquote, first of all, they'd have to pay for this big name to make sure, because the musicians got to get paid. I mean, if you look at the history of this music, unfortunately, that was one of the things that that was kind of bad about jazz in a lot of settings. The musicians didn't get paid. They would come and play, and they may get a free meal, a drink or two, but they're giving you of them, of their substance, of their creativity, and not reaping the rewards. And that's why a lot of jazz musicians will turn around and look at what other musicians in other genres are earning, and then it's like,
well, I'm sure a part of that is, I mean, you can say is that the musicians were Black, and this was coming about in a time that was still a Jim Crow era. And so
Amen.
It's a very different vibe to say, oh, yeah, we're going to bring in this quintet, these 5 Black musicians. They'll be happy if we give them dinner, versus other people who maybe had agents working for them, or, showed up in suits or whatever it is. There's definitely a history there.
That brings me to something that I know Phil Chapter and I used to talk about.
Yeah.
R&B.
Mm-hmm.
Does the name Alan Freed ring a bell?
Yeah.
And the whole payola scandal?
Yeah.
The reality, in addition to some payola, which was prevalent throughout, they went after Alan Freed because when Alan Freed gave a concert, and you can go check it historically, he would bring in Black musicians to play behind whoever was singing. And a lot of people didn't appreciate that he was supporting these African American musicians, many of whom were great jazz players in early R&B. And that was one of the reasons they began to really try and get Alan Freed out of the way, which they did. And you get, eventually Dick Clark and American Bandstand. And that's a whole other history also of that really needs to be taken a look at.
Yeah.
Because Dick Clark was not a hero, not at all.
Oh, no, I know.
Not at all.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's get back to jazz in the Valley.
Yeah, but I mean, that is important. That's important to the story of jazz, and it's important as we're talking on an episode that's airing during Black History Month. We would not have jazz as an art form if it weren't for Black Americans. And if we did not have jazz as an art form, what else would we not have? I mean, what are the cousins of jazz? You described yourself as a big R&B guy. I mean, I assume that is a successor of jazz. It's
all related. No doubt about it. I mean, gospel music, it's all coming out of that same cultural melting pot, if you will. Gospel, a good example. Heard of the pianist Bobby Timmons, who played with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers.
Yep.
The thing about Bobby Timmons, and you can listen to him play some of the things, that's straight from the church. And a lot of musicians came out of the church. And you hear that gospel influence in terms of what they would share with the audience. Once again, it's based on the musician's own experience, what their lifestyle has been, what influences they've had, and they give it to you. They share it with you, which is really a blessing, because you're getting to hear different things from different people. And somebody born in Boston, Massachusetts, and raised in Massachusetts is going to sound a little different than somebody from Kansas City. That's just the way it is. And when they get together, they begin to share, and they're like, oh, wow, okay, I hear that. Listen to this. And that's the beauty of this music. It's probably the most democratic art form that you can find.
Yep.
Because everyone has an opportunity to say what they want to say, and all that comes from the inside, and feel whatever they want to feel. And we are the ones who are blessed with hearing what these individuals bring to us. I mean, it's really wonderful when you really see it in a much broader sense.
Yeah. And then what it has grown into in ways that you do not think are related to jazz. One of the great loves of my life is Michael McDonald. I love him. I actually saw him in concert this summer with the Doobie Brothers. And I just finished listening to him read his autobiography that came out recently. And he talks extensively about how all of his influences were the Black musicians that he grew up with. He was from St. Louis. So kind of growing up in that scene, lots of Black musicians and lots of gospel. That was his biggest influence in developing his musical style. And then he went on, obviously, to be one of the most prolific and well-known studio musicians ever, playing with Steely Dan and the Doobie Brothers and Christopher Cross. There's a new documentary out on HBO Max called Yacht Rock. And so it's all about that whole era, and he is prominently featured in it. But so who would look at Yacht Rock and say, oh, yeah, that all goes back to gospel? But in that way, if you think of Michael McDonald as being emblematic of that subgenre called Yacht Rock and ask him what his influences are, there we go. We end up right back there with the gospel that turned into jazz that somehow spiraled off into some yacht rock as well. So
where did Elvis Presley get his?
Oh, yeah. He was heavily influenced by gospel.
The Beatles also.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all right there.
Yeah.
I mean, but a lot of folks don't go beyond the first layer.
Right.
The fact that they like it, the music is great, but really getting into the history of the music and who brought it together is really fascinating. Really fascinating stuff. Yes, it is.
But also, that's okay too. If you just like to listen to Jazz in the Valley for 2 hours a week and just chill out with a nice glass of wine or whatever it is, that's okay too. So I will not be ridiculous enough to ask you your favorite artists, but
thank you.
Who are some of your favorite contemporary artists? What's some of the stuff, we talked a little about Monty Alexander. What's some of the stuff you're really excited about? People who are new or emerging artists that you're like, man, if this is the future of jazz, I feel really good about this.
There's a young alto saxophone player. His name is Emmanuel Wilkerson. He's somebody you should listen to.
Okay.
And when I had an opportunity to talk with him, he totally knocked me out when he said, I said, well, who did you listen to? And he said, a gentleman named Benny Carter. People say, Benny Carter. Now, I was shocked that he came out of that listening set of Benny Carter. Benny Carter was fantastic. And Benny Carter also played trumpet, by the way. But most people today wouldn't know who Benny Carter was. But here's this young man, I believe he's in his early 30s. And he was saying the guy for him was Benny Carter. I was like, really? I said, how many of your contemporaries even know who Benny Carter was? And he kind of like, you're right. But there was something about what Benny Carter did on the alto saxophone that grabbed Emmanuel Wilkerson and said, hey, this might be a way you might want to take a listen. And it's the same way people say, I'm a big Coltrane fan now, but Coltrane wasn't the first tenor saxophone player that I listened to. It was Charles Lloyd, who I still love to today, who's still actually living. I mean, Charles is still active in his 80s, still playing.
Nice.
And that's because I got first introduced to Charles Lloyd by a good friend of mine before I started listening to John Coltrane, or what people were talking about John Coltrane. And, Charles Lloyd is still my first guy. He was the one that put me on this path. And then you learn that Charles Lloyd, he played for a time with Chico Hamilton. You say, well, who's Chico Hamilton? Well, Chico Hamilton was a drummer. And then you said, well, who did Chico play with? And once this thing begins to open up, I mean, you just start smiling because you can see the relationships between the music and the musicians and who moved from the West Coast to the East Coast and who never left the West Coast. There's guys out there that play wonderful music, but a lot of times us on the East Coast really don't get a chance to hear them unless somebody brings them with them. That's why I say the history of this music is something that's right in the sound of it, whether people realize it or not. That they're getting a total picture of this art form. And I think it's great. And listen every Wednesday between 7 and 9.
Yes. All right. So for people who are super excited and they're like, I'm going to start listening to Sharif's show every week, and I'm going to also, what else? What else can we do? If we're here in the Hudson Valley, because there is not as much live performance of jazz, and maybe we don't want to wait until August when the concert in Warriors Park rolls around. What else is there?
There's a venue in Saugerties. It's called The Local.
Oh, it's the one that they restored a church and turned it into a performing arts venue. Yeah.
They have, and I've been impressed with the musicians they bring in. These are top name musicians that some people would know about, which is great. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't get an audience at all. I could throw out a name or two and who? Nah, I don't know what do they do? That kind of thing. But the local has been doing some good things. And if you're in the Hudson Valley, you have a car, so you can start to move around.
Mm-hmm.
You can go down towards Westchester and Peekskill. There's a club called the Bean Runner Cafe in Peekskill, New York. Then you got the Falcon, which is in Marlboro, New York.
Oh.
Let's see. You have Jazz on Main, which is in Mount Kisco, New York. I mean, there are a few places here and there where you can get out and keep your ears open and begin to hear things. And sometimes you may have to take a chance. You look at a name and not know who it is.
Mm-hmm.
But then you'll say, oh, man, I've been missing this all this time.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. And that's really good about seeing the music live. There's nothing better than to hear jazz live in a live setting, because there's many things going on between the musician and the audience.
Yep.
This is not where somebody's lip syncing and it's all recorded. No, you have to be there because you energize the musicians, they'll energize you, and everyone comes together.
Yeah.
And it really is an atmosphere that more and more people need to experience.
Yeah, it's like you're co-creating the music, because absolutely, the musicians are feeding off the energy of the audience.
No doubt.
And I mean, my advice as a jazz lover, but an amateur, would be, if you have a chance to go see live jazz and you have no idea who the people are, just go. Just go. Because I guarantee you're not going to be disappointed. I have never happened upon live jazz anywhere and walked away saying, that sucked. You will always end up being energized and amazed. I know of jazz musicians, I'm sure that don't even read music. They're just feeling this stuff as they go. And there's so much improvisation, which I grew up classically trained to play the flute. I still play the flute. But I mean, if you were to tell me to go play something without sheet music, I would look at you like you had two heads. I never learned improvisation. And so that's just an aspect of jazz that I find really fascinating too.
Yeah. Hey, get your ears to open up a little more. That's really have this teacher. You had it for years. It's WKCR, Columbia University Station. And it simply just said, listen. And that's all we like folks to do. Because once you do that, we know it's going to affect you one way or the other, and most times you'll say, wow, I've never heard anything like that, but I like what I heard.
Yeah.
So let me hear some more of that.
Yep.
Let me check this out. And before you know it, you'll be running around wherever jazz is being played and you'll have a ball.
Yep.
You'll have an absolute ball.
And we're so fortunate with the internet that it's so easy to discover new music. It's not like when I was a teenager, if you liked something, then you had to hope the library had it, or you had to go to the record store when your mom would drive you to the mall. I mean, now if you hear something that you like, you can ask your phone, hey, what song is this? And your digital assistant will tell you, and then you can Google it, and then you could find more like it. So there's no excuse not to find new stuff if that's what you want to do.
Totally. That I remember growing up, you'd carry your LPs around, and those things were heavy, so you can only carry so many at a time. And I remember going to listening sessions. The guy would say, "Hey man, come by the house. I just got the new Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers." Really? Okay. I'll be there about 8:00. And they'd put the music on, and you'd listen, and you'd say, "Oh man, is that Lee Morgan on trumpet? Oh, wait a minute. That doesn't sound like, or is that Freddie Hubbard?" I mean, you start doing these kind of things. Yeah. And I've seen people who get into the music and can really identify who the musician is.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I didn't or don't like about smooth jazz. To me, at least, they all sound the same. But
I am a smooth jazz lover, though, for exactly that reason. That's my perfect background music.
You don't have
when
to
I'm
think.
working.
It's just there.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like a little sonic hug, but I don't have to concentrate on it. So,
okay. Well, that's where I can't take but so much of that.
Yeah.
I really can't, because when you realize that each person, and as musicians will tell you, you need to have your own sound. You could start out listening to somebody, trying to sound like somebody, but as you develop and continue to practice and practice and practice and play, you're going to have your own sound. And that's what makes this music, I think, a bit unique. And the fact that, as I said, the more you listen, you say, hey, man, that's Sonny Rollins.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Oh, that's not Dexter Gordon.
Yeah.
That's Sonny Rollins, or that's who. And you say, oh, wow, I was able to hear Sonny Rollins.
Yeah.
These other tenor saxophone players, that's not Coleman Hawkins. I mean, it gets to be great. You're like, aha, I've achieved something.
That's
and it's
cool.
really something special when you make that investment with, first of all, your ears, and then the spirit of the music comes into you, and then you'll be able to identify, oh, yeah, that sounds a bit like Ornette Coleman, but Ornette Coleman couldn't have been playing with this guy because Ornette Coleman, I mean, his whole, we could just go on and on and on.
Yeah.
In that realm where you begin to identify musicians, identify musicians you like or don't like. I mean, and it's okay.
Yeah.
It's just fine. Yep. There's so much going on. And then you said you like the flute. What jazz flute player do you like?
I don't know any jazz flute players.
Oh, okay.
I know, because occasionally I'll hear jazz, but if you're like, who are your favorite jazz players? I like a lot of jazz piano. I like a lot of jazz saxophone. I can't name a famous jazz flutist.
Okay, not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah.
The more you listen.
Yeah.
So I got to program some jazz flute players.
Okay.
That's
I would good. That'd be a great episode.
I would suggest Eric Dolphy would be a perfect one.
Okay.
For you to start listening to.
Okay.
A gentleman named Frank Wess, Wess, would be another one. Or Yusef Lateef. I mean, there's a number of them. But I think Eric Dolphy, Rahsaan Roland Kirk plays some great flute, as well as all kinds of reed instruments. There's so much available.
Yeah.
That once you get on the path, and you really can't satisfy your appetite because there's so much more you haven't heard yet.
Which is so exciting. And just to bring it back full circle, I love that you started at a college radio station and now you're here doing all of this. I think that college radio
By the way, I'm still doing a college radio station.
That's so great. I think college radio stations are such an underappreciated method for discovering quirky, fun music and for kids. Especially college campuses should be a place for, fertile idea exchange. And I think, especially now with the internet, you can pick any college campus and you can go find their radio station. So my partner's daughter actually goes to college in Tallahassee, and she's got a gig on the college radio station, and I can listen to it online in real time when she's on, and she has super eclectic taste in music. I have found all kinds of things I would never have heard if not for her, and it's so much fun. Shout out to Haley. So I think that college radio stations are such a fun place to just go poke around and find some shows. Is your show still a jazz show?
Yes. It comes on Thursday nights.
Okay.
From 6 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Okay.
WKCR.org.
All right. We'll link to that too if people need more Sharif.
It's called Jazz Alternatives is the name of the program.
Nice. So tell us one last time where to find you in Kingston and where to find you on the radio at Columbia, and also anything else that you know so far about the 25th anniversary of the concert.
Okay. Transart Presents Jazz in the Valley comes to you each and every Wednesday. We didn't do Christmas this year because KNY did all Christmas music on the 25th, which is a Wednesday. But every Wednesday, Allah willing that we are able, we'll bring you jazz from 7 to 9 p.m. That's WKNY, radiokingston.org online. And if you want to hear some more of the stuff that I do, it's on Thursday evenings. Once again, live, WKCR.org, a program coming out of Columbia University called Jazz Alternatives. That's from 6 to 9 on Thursdays, WKCR.org. We're in the planning stages for the 25th anniversary Jazz in the Valley concert. I think it's going to be a big to-do coming up, so we'll keep people posted.
Okay.
But it's every August, the third Sunday, and hopefully this year, both Saturday and Sunday. Nice. But we try and bring some of the top musicians available to the Hudson Valley. So folks don't have to travel down into the city, New York City, to hear them, experience them. And it's outdoors. So people come and lay out on the grass or bring their chairs or sit under the tent. But it's an opportunity to people to meet the musicians. The musicians play, they stay there for a while, they listen like everybody else. You can talk to them, and it really begins to see musicians as human beings instead of just somebody on an album or somebody you may have heard about. And you get to be with other people who enjoy the music and love the music, and a good time is had by all. There's no doubt about it.
It's like a festival atmosphere.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. And if you don't know Warriors Park in Poughkeepsie, it's literally right on the waterfront. You can see the walkway over the Hudson. You're right under the Mid-Hudson Bridge. And
exactly.
It's a beautiful setting. I can't think of a more beautiful place to sit and listen to some jazz. So, all right. I'm going to call Greer and see if she needs some volunteers, too, because I would love to get involved with making
Okay, I'll give you her number once we're off the air.
Okay.
And you can definitely call her.
I will.
You know, because she could always use volunteers.
I bet.
She could always use volunteers.
Very cool. Thank you so much. We'll put all the links to all the places where people can find you, and we will keep everybody posted on the goings on with jazz in the Valley.
Jennifer, it's been a pleasure. I thank you for asking me to join you, and we got to do this again.
Okay. All right. You can come back when you have all the details for the August concert.
Definitely. Definitely we'll do that. Definitely we'll do that. All right.
Or maybe we'll do an episode from the concert. That would be fun.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, this will not be the last you hear of Sharif on Valley Girls Podcast. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Please like and subscribe, rate and review, because as we know, it all helps tremendously. Do you love the Valley Girls? Tell a friend. Have ideas for the podcast? Tell us. The easiest way to chat with us is our Facebook group, Valley Girls Podcast Pod Squad, or you can contact us through our website, valleygirlspodcast.com, where you can also sign up for our newsletter so you never miss a thing. And of course, we're on Instagram at valleygirlspodny. We can't wait to hear from you. Oh, and do you love our theme music as much as we do? The music for this episode is by Robert Burke Warren, entitled Painting a Vast Blue Sky, and can be found on his album Red-Headed Friend, available on iTunes and Spotify, and at the link in the show notes. Bye for now.